A waitress passed a Hell's Angel. A hidden note. One of your brothers betrayed you. The rain came down in sheets, hammering the highway like it had something to prove. Marcus Kane leaned into the wind, his old leather jacket soaked through at the shoulders, headlight cutting a weak tunnel through the dark. Water sprayed off his front tire in long silver ropes. He didn't mind it much. 25 years on a bike taught a man to make peace with weather. He thought about those 25 years a lot on nights like this, when the road stretched long and empty, and there was nothing to do but ride and remember. He'd been 20 when he first put on the colors, young and angry and looking for somewhere to put all that fire. The club had given him that place. It had also, somewhere along the way, given him something he never expected to find among a bunch of leather-clad outlaws: a reason to be a better man. They called him Preacher because he talked more than he swung, because when two brothers got into it over money or pride or a woman, Marcus was the one who sat them down at a table and got them talking instead of throwing punches. He didn't plan on being that guy. It just happened, one settled argument at a time, until the name stuck and the respect came with it. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Behind him, his saddlebags rode heavy and full. Boxes of gauze, IV bags, insulin, things a doctor 2 counties over needed and couldn't get any other way since the state had pulled her funding. Nobody outside a small circle knew what the Angels really carried on nights like this. The world thought bikers like him ran guns or worse. Let them think it. The truth was better kept quiet. Quiet things lasted longer. He'd done this run a dozen times without trouble. Load up at the warehouse, ride the back roads past the checkpoints that didn't matter because there was nothing illegal in those boxes anyway, and drop everything at Dr. Amelia Hayes's clinic before sunrise. Simple. Routine. The kind of thing that let him sleep easy even after everything else in his life, that didn't let him sleep at all. The rain got worse as he came up on the turnoff for the Rosalie Diner, a squat little building glowing yellow in the black night like a lighthouse for tired travelers. He'd stopped there before, more out of habit than anything else. Hot coffee. A grilled cheese if he was hungry. A place to dry off and check his phone for any word from the club before the last stretch of road. He eased off the throttle and rolled into the gravel lot, tires crunching over wet stone. The neon sign buzzed pink and blue through the downpour, half the letters flickering like they were thinking about giving up for the night. He parked near the door, cut the engine, and sat there a second, listening to the rain drum on his helmet. 25 years, he thought again. A lot of roads, a lot of brothers, a lot of trust built mile by mile, mistake by mistake, forgiveness by forgiveness. He believed in that trust the way some men believed in God. It was the only church he'd ever needed. He swung his leg over the bike and stood, joints stiff from the cold and the miles. Rain ran down the back of his neck as he ducked under the diner's awning, boots splashing through a puddle by the curb. He shook himself off like a big dog, water flying from his sleeves, and pulled the door open. A bell jingled overhead, tinny and bright against the sound of rain hissing on the pavement outside. Warm air hit him first, thick with the smell of coffee and bacon grease. The diner was near empty, just a couple of tired truckers hunched over plates in the back, and the low hum of a radio playing something soft and forgotten. Behind the counter, a waitress looked up. She was maybe 30, dark hair pulled back tight, apron stained from a long shift. She looked tired in the way people look tired at 2 in the morning, like her body was running on nothing but coffee and stubbornness. But her eyes were sharp, alert in a way that didn't match the rest of her. She watched him a beat too long before she moved, before she grabbed a menu and offered him a booth by the window. Della Ruiz had stopped counting the hours a long time ago. Somewhere around midnight, the numbers on the clock stopped meaning anything at all. There was just the next table, the next coffee refill, the next tired face looking up at her wanting eggs or pie, or just somebody to nod along while they talked about nothing. She'd worked the day shift at the diner for 3 years. And now she worked the night shift too, 4 nights a week, because Ray's heart didn't care what the insurance company said it would cover. Her father's heart. That was the thing that sat on her chest these days, heavier than any tray she carried. Ray Ruiz had raised her alone since she was 6 years old, working 2 jobs himself back then, never once complaining, never once making her feel like a burden even when money was tight enough to hurt. Now the roles had flipped, and it was her turn to carry him, and some nights that felt like carrying the whole world. The doctors called it congestive heart failure, which sounded almost gentle, like something that might just fix itself if you waited long enough. It wouldn't. The medicine helped some, but medicine was expensive, and the tests were expensive, and the specialist visits were the kind of expensive that made Della's stomach drop every time an envelope showed up in the mailbox with a hospital logo on the corner. So she picked up doubles. She picked up every shift Gary would give her, and some he didn't know he was giving her until she was already there, tying her apron on before he'd even unlocked the front door. Tonight had been slow, which should have felt like a small mercy, but only meant fewer tips to stack against the pile of bills waiting for her at home. She wiped down the counter for the 3rd time in an hour, more out of habit than need, and glanced at the 2 truckers in the back booth, men who'd been nursing the same cups of coffee for almost 40 minutes now, talking low about a football game neither of them seemed to actually care about. The radio hummed something old and worn out, a song her father used to sing along to in the kitchen back when his voice was stronger and his hands didn't shake pouring coffee. She caught her own reflection in the dark window glass, apron stained, hair falling loose from its tie, dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer fully covered anymore. She looked away from it quick. There wasn't time to feel sorry for herself. There was never time for that. The bell over the door jingled, and cold, wet air rushed in along with it. She looked up out of habit, the same habit that had kept her safe working nights alone more times than she liked to think about. A big man stood in the doorway, soaked through, leather jacket dark with rain, broad shoulders filling up the frame of the door. Bikers came through sometimes, and most of them were polite enough, tired enough themselves not to cause trouble. This one had a calm, steady way of standing there, like he was used to storms and didn't much mind them. She grabbed a menu and waved him toward a booth by the window, the good booth, the one that didn't have a wobbly leg. He nodded his thanks and settled in without a word, peeling off his soaked gloves and setting them on the table like a man in no hurry at all. That was when the door jingled again, and 2 more men stepped inside, shaking rain-off jackets that weren't the same as the bikers. Their vests were a different cut, different patches, colors she didn't recognize from the regulars who came through. They didn't look at her. They didn't look at the menu rack by the door. They walked straight to the back booth, the one furthest from the windows, and slid in across from each other, heads already bent close together before they'd even ordered. Della grabbed the coffee pot and headed their way out of habit. But something in the way they sat made her steps slow, without her quite deciding to slow them. Their voices stayed low, clipped, tense in a way regular conversation never sounded. One of them glanced up as she approached, eyes flicking past her toward the front of the diner, toward the man by the window, before dropping back down to the table. She set the coffee pot down on the counter and grabbed a rag instead, the old kind of trick she'd learned years ago when rowdy customers needed watching. Nobody paid attention to a woman wiping down tables. Nobody ever did. She moved to the booth right behind the two men, the one that didn't need cleaning at all, and started wiping circles into the formica like her life depended on it. "Told you, it's set for tonight," one of the men was saying. He was younger, maybe 30, with a shaved head and a nervous way of tapping his fingers against the table. "The tip-off already went through. Cops are going to be watching that stretch of road by 10. The other man was older, heavier, with a gray beard that made him look like he should have been somebody's uncle instead of whatever he actually was. He kept his voice even lower, so low Della had to stop breathing just to catch the words. "Shipment's supposed to come through the back route. That's what he told us. Should be clean." "You sure Kane don't know?" Della's rag froze against the table for half a second before she made herself keep moving. Kane. She didn't know the name, not really, but she knew the way it landed in the air when the bald one said it, like a curse word dressed up polite. "Kane don't know nothing," the older one said, and there was a laugh underneath the words, ugly and satisfied, like a man who already knew how the story ended and liked the ending just fine. "That's the whole point, ain't it? 25 years riding around thinking he built something solid, and it's about to come apart because of one phone call." "They're gonna love this," the bald one said. "The Angel's finally getting what's coming to them. All that time acting like they're better than everybody else." Della's stomach turned to ice. She glanced, just for a second, towards the window booth, where the big man sat quiet with his hands wrapped around the coffee mug she hadn't even brought him yet. He hadn't moved. He didn't know. Whatever these two men were talking about, whatever was coming for him tonight, he was sitting there like a man waiting out a storm that hadn't started yet. And he had no idea it was already here, already circling. She thought of Ray, home alone with his oxygen tank and his stack of pill bottles lined up on the kitchen counter like little soldiers. She thought about how she always told herself not to get involved, how getting involved in things that weren't hers to fix never did anybody any favors, especially not a tired waitress with bills she couldn't pay and a father she couldn't lose. She should have kept wiping the table. She should have walked away. But her feet stayed planted, and her ears stayed open, straining for anything else she could catch. "You really think Wheels is going to go through with it?" the bald one asked, quieter now, quieter than before. The older one snorted. "Wheels wants to prove himself. Said he's tired of being nobody in that club. Give a man like that enough reason, he'll hand you the keys to the whole operation and thank you for asking." Della didn't know what a Wheels was, didn't know if it was a person or a place or some code word for something else entirely, but the word betrayal sat plain and ugly in the middle of everything they'd said, plain as the coffee stains on her apron. Somebody was selling somebody out, and whoever this Kane was, whoever that quiet man in the window booth turned out to be, he didn't have a clue what was coming. That was when the bald one looked up. His eyes caught hers, just for a second, but a second was long enough. He didn't blink. He didn't look away polite like most customers did when they caught a waitress listening in on something they shouldn't have. He held her gaze steady, cold, assessing, like he was deciding right then and there how much of a problem she might turn out to be. The older man noticed, too, following his partner's stare, and his face went hard and still in a way that made the hair on Della's arms stand straight up. She didn't wait to find out what came next. She turned on her heel, rag still clutched in her fist, and walked back toward the counter fast enough that her sneakers squeaked against the tile floor. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat, in her ears, everywhere at once. She grabbed the coffee pot like it was a life raft and held on tight, not daring to look back at the booth behind her, not daring to look at the window either, where the big, quiet man still sat waiting, still not knowing a single thing about the storm heading straight for him. Della set the coffee pot down behind the counter, her hands shaking just enough that the glass rattled against the burner. She pressed her palms flat on the cool metal counter and made herself breathe. "Walk away," she told herself. "It's not your business. You don't know these men. You don't know that man in the window booth either. You've got Ray to think about. The pills lined up on the counter, the bills stacked in the drawer you can't look at anymore without your chest going tight. You cannot afford trouble. You cannot afford to be the woman who got herself noticed by men like that." But her eyes kept drifting to the window booth anyway. He sat there the same way he had since he walked in, big shoulders squared, hands wrapped around a mug she still hadn't filled. There was something steady about him, something that didn't match the leather vest and the road dust on his boots. He looked like a man who carried weight without complaining about it. He looked, she thought, like somebody's father, somebody's brother, somebody who mattered to people who didn't even know what was coming for him. She thought about the word the older man had used. Betrayal. She thought about how easy it would be to say nothing, to just keep pouring coffee and wiping tables and pretending she hadn't heard a thing. Nobody would ever know. Nobody would ever ask her about it. She could go home tonight, check on Ray, fall into bed, and never think about the stranger in the window booth again. Except she knew she would. She knew she'd lie awake picturing his face if something happened to him, and she'd sat there polishing coffee pots instead of warning him. Her father had raised her better than that. Ray Ruiz might have been sick and tired, and hooked up to an oxygen tank most nights now, but the man had never once looked away from somebody in trouble, not in all the years Della had known him. He used to say the world didn't need more people minding their own business. It needed more people brave enough to mind everybody else's, just a little, when it counted. This counted. Della reached into her apron pocket, past the balled-up receipts and the spare change she kept for the register, until her fingers found the stub of a pencil she used for scribbling orders. She yanked a napkin from the dispenser on the counter, the cheap, thin kind that tore if you looked at it wrong, and smoothed it flat against her palm. Her hand hovered there for a second, pencil pressed to paper, heart hammering so loud she was sure somebody could hear it. What if she was wrong? What if this was nothing, some strange coincidence, some other Kane in some other kind of trouble that had nothing to do with the quiet man by the window? What if he took the note wrong? Thought it was a threat? Thought she was part of whatever was coming for him? She looked over her shoulder. The two men in the back booth had gone quiet, heads bent together over the table, but the bald one's eyes flicked toward her every few seconds, like he was still deciding what to do about the waitress who'd heard too much. That decided it. Della pressed the pencil to the napkin and wrote quickly, her handwriting cramped and uneven from the shake in her hand. "One of your brothers betrayed you. Be careful tonight." She read it once, folded it in half, then in half again, until it was small enough to hide in her palm. She grabbed the coffee pot with her other hand and walked toward the window booth, forcing her steps slow and even, forcing her face into the same tired, polite smile she gave every customer who walked through that door. "Here you go," she said, setting the steaming mug down in front of him. Her fingers slid the folded napkin beneath the saucer in the same motion, quick and practiced, the same way she might slide a to-go box across a counter. She straightened up and met his eyes for just a moment. He was watching her carefully now, something sharp and assessing behind his calm expression, like he'd noticed the change in her hands even if he didn't understand it yet. Della didn't explain. She didn't dare, not with those two men still watching from the back booth. She turned and walked away, leaving him there with his coffee going cold in the steam rising off the mug, and the folded napkin tucked beneath the saucer, waiting for him to find it. Marcus waited until Della had walked back behind the counter before he moved. He didn't look down right away. 25 years of riding had taught him that much. You never look surprised. You never look rattled. Not in a diner off a rain-slicked highway where anybody could be watching. He lifted the mug to his lips, took a slow sip, and let his eyes drop casually to the saucer. The napkin sat there, folded small and tight, tucked half under the porcelain rim. He set the mug down and slid the napkin free with 2 fingers, keeping the motion easy, unhurried, like he was just wiping his mouth. He unfolded it under the table, out of sight of the room, and read the cramped pencil writing once. One of your brothers betrayed you. Be careful tonight. He read it again. His jaw tightened. His first thought, the one that came fast and hard and automatic after 2.5 decades of living a life where trust could get a man killed, was that this was a setup, a trap dressed up as kindness. Rival clubs had done stranger things to rattle a man before hitting him. Get a scared-looking waitress to slip a note, make him paranoid, make him call his brothers in a panic, make him say something over the phone that could be used against him later. It wouldn't be the first time somebody tried to turn the angels against each other with nothing but a few whispered words and a folded napkin. His hand moved toward his jacket pocket where his phone sat, thumb already picturing the number he'd dial. The voice on the other end. Danny, probably, since Danny always answered first, steady as a rock, telling him to stay calm. They'd sort it out. But then he stopped. He looked up, past the window glass streaked with rain, toward the counter where Della stood with her back half-turned, rearranging mugs that didn't need rearranging, her shoulders pulled in tight like she was trying to make herself smaller. Her hands. He'd watched her hands when she set the mug down. They'd been shaking. Not nervous customer service shaking. Real fear. The kind that lived in a person's bones. The kind you couldn't fake even if you tried, because it showed up in places people forgot to control. Like the tendons in the back of a hand, or the way somebody's breath caught before they spoke. That wasn't the behavior of somebody running a con. Marcus folded the napkin once more and tucked it into his palm. He glanced toward the back booth. 2 men, leather vests, colors he didn't recognize, heads bent low together over untouched plates of eggs gone cold. One of them, bald, thick-necked, kept flicking his eyes toward the counter every few seconds. Toward Della. That settled something in Marcus's chest. A cold, quiet certainty. He raised 2 fingers, just barely, the old signal from 100 roadside diners over the years. The little wave that meant come here and caught Della's eye. She hesitated. He saw it, the flicker of fear crossing her face before she smoothed it over and walked toward him, coffee pot in hand like a shield. "Refill?" she asked, voice a little too bright. "Zit," Marcus said quietly, nodding toward the seat across from him. "Just for a second." She glanced toward the back booth, then slid into the seat across from him, setting the pot down between them like she needed something to hold on to. "I need you to tell me what you heard," Marcus said, keeping his voice low, steady, the same voice he used to calm arguments between brothers who'd had too much to drink and too little patience. "All of it. Take your time." Della's hands wrapped around the edge of the table. Her knuckles went pale. "I wasn't trying to listen," she said, voice trembling. "I was just clearing the booth behind them. They didn't think I was paying attention." "I believe you," Marcus said. "What did they say?" She swallowed hard, eyes darting once more toward the back of the diner before landing back on him. "They said something about a shipment," she whispered. "And they said your name, Kane. They said it like they knew you, like they'd been waiting for you to walk in." Marcus felt something cold settle low in his stomach, colder than the rain outside, colder than anything he'd felt in a long time. "Tell me exactly what they looked like," Marcus said. "Patches, colors, anything on their cuts you remember?" Della closed her eyes for a second, like she was pulling the picture back up from somewhere she'd tried to push it down. The one facing me, the bald one, had a patch on his left shoulder. Some kind of skull, but it had wings coming off the sides, red ones. I don't know club colors. I just know it wasn't anything I've seen come through here before. That's not one of ours, Marcus said quietly. Not one of the friendly clubs either. He kept his voice even, but his mind was already sorting through the mental map he carried of every outfit that ran anywhere near this stretch of highway. A red-winged skull didn't match anything he knew, which meant either something new or something that had been hiding. What else? He said. Anything they said. Exact words if you remember them. Della's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. They kept saying tonight, like it was set, like it was already decided, and they laughed about it, the way people laugh when they think they've already won something. She paused, chewing on the inside of her cheek. One of them called the other one Bishop. I remember because it stuck out, not a normal name. Marcus nodded slowly, filing it away. Names meant something. Names could be traced. Anything else? He said. Think hard. Sometimes the smallest thing matters most. She was quiet for a moment, staring down at the coffee pot like the answer might be sitting in the dark liquid. Then her eyes lifted, and something shifted in her face, like she'd just remembered a piece she almost let slip past her. They said a name, she said slowly. Not yours, somebody else's. It sounded like a nickname. They said it like they knew him, like they'd talked to him before. Marcus went still. What was it? Wheels, Della said. They called him Wheels. The word hit Marcus like a fist to the chest, quiet and sudden, the kind of blow that didn't show on the outside but knocked something loose deep down where nobody could see it. Wheels. That wasn't a name a stranger would know. That wasn't a name printed on any patch or spoken outside the tight circle of brothers who rode with him year after year. Wheels was what they'd called Danny Ferris since the day he joined, on account of how he could read a map and plan a route better than any man in the club, could find his way through back roads and detours like the whole world was laid out in his head. It was a name born out of respect, given by the club, spoken only among family. Marcus's jaw tightened. His hands, wrapped around the coffee mug, went rigid. If two strangers in an unfamiliar diner off a rain-soaked highway knew to use that name, laughing about it like they had some private joke, then this wasn't outsiders trying to shake him. This wasn't a rival club fishing for a reaction. Somebody had given them that name, somebody who knew it, somebody close. The realization came slow, and then all at once, the way a wave built up quiet before it crashed. If they knew Danny's nickname, they might know more. And if this shipment tonight was the one Marcus thought it was, not the kind of cargo the world assumed the Angels hauled, not guns or drugs or stolen goods, but boxes of donated medicine, bandages, insulin, things bound 2 counties over for Dr. Amelia Hayes and the clinic that survived only because of what the club quietly carried to her doors twice a month, then somebody had handed over a secret that only a handful of trusted brothers even knew existed. That secret wasn't club business in the way people assumed. It wasn't drugs or turf. It was something Marcus had built carefully over years, something so far outside what people expected from men in leather and colors that even most of his own brothers didn't know the full truth of it. Only the ones closest to him. Only the ones he trusted enough to bring along on the quiet runs. Marcus felt the blood go cold in his veins, a chill that had nothing to do with the rain outside or the draft through the diner's rattling windows. If the rival club knew about the clinic, if they knew to target tonight's run specifically, then the leak hadn't come from some outsider snooping around. It had come from inside, from someone who rode beside him, someone he called brother. Marcus sat very still, the coffee mug forgotten between his hands, going cold the way everything in him seemed to be going cold. He ran it through his mind again, slow this time, piece by piece, the way he'd learned to break down a problem instead of letting it swallow him whole. Somebody knew the name Wheels. Somebody knew it well enough to say it easy, casual, like a joke between friends. That wasn't guesswork. That wasn't a lucky guess made by strangers trying to rattle a man they'd never met. And if they knew the name, they likely knew the run. Tonight's run. The one that looked, to anyone watching from outside, like just another supply drop the Angels made without much notice. Except this one carried boxes of insulin and bandages and medicine bound for Amelia Hayes and her clinic, the kind of cargo that would never show up on any police report, because it wasn't the kind of thing anyone expected outlaws to carry. Marcus had built that secret carefully, over years, brick by brick, trusting only a small circle of brothers with the truth of what they were really doing on those late-night rides. It was the one good thing he'd managed to build in a life that hadn't always given him much to be proud of. And now someone wanted to tear it down. Publicly. Loudly. In a way that wouldn't just cost him a shipment, but would cost him everything the club had quietly stood for. This wasn't a rival gang sniffing around for territory. This was a rival gang who had been handed a gift, wrapped up and delivered by someone wearing the same colors Marcus wore. He felt something twist low in his gut, a feeling he hadn't had in a long time, not since the early years when trust still felt like something fragile instead of something earned. 25 years he'd ridden with these men. 25 years he'd have sworn, without blinking, that every man in his circle would take a bullet before he'd give up a secret that mattered. He'd been wrong. Somebody had proven him wrong. Della was watching him now, her arms wrapped tight around herself like she was cold, though the diner wasn't cold at all. Her eyes were careful, searching his face for some sign of what he was thinking, some clue as to whether she'd just handed a dangerous man a dangerous piece of information he might use badly. Marcus looked up at her, and whatever hardness had settled into his jaw softened just slightly when he met her eyes. "You didn't have to tell me any of this," he said. "You didn't know me an hour ago. You could have just poured my coffee and let me walk out that door." "I know what it looks like when somebody's about to get hurt," Della said quietly. "I've seen it before. I wasn't going to just watch it happen." Marcus nodded slowly, turning that over in his mind. 25 years on the road, and it took a tired waitress on a rain-soaked night to remind him what real loyalty looked like, the kind that didn't ask for anything back. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded bill, and set it on the table. More than the coffee was worth. More than the whole meal was worth. Della opened her mouth like she might argue, but he raised a hand before she could. "That's not payment," he said. "That's a thank you. Keep it." She hesitated, then nodded, tucking it away without another word. "Listen to me," Marcus said, his voice low and steady, the kind of voice that made people listen even when he wasn't raising it. "Whatever happens after tonight, you're not going to be part of the fallout. Nobody's going to come looking for you, and nobody's going to know you said a word to me. I'll make sure of that." Della's shoulders eased down just slightly, like she'd been holding her breath since she'd slid that napkin under his saucer. Marcus stood, dropping a few more bills for the coffee, and pulled his jacket tight against the rain, still tapping steady against the windows. He paused at the door, looking back at her one last time. "Thank you," he said again, quieter this time, meaning it all the way down. "You did a good thing tonight." Then he pushed out into the wet dark, swinging his leg over his bike, the engine roaring to life beneath him like something waking up angry. He pulled out onto the highway, rain stinging his face, his mind already racing ahead to the club, to the shipment, to the faces of every brother who'd ever ridden beside him. Somewhere among them was a man who'd sold him out, and Marcus intended to find out who before that shipment ever reached the clinic. The clubhouse sat back off the county road, a squat building with metal siding and a gravel lot that turned to soup every time it rained. Marcus pulled in slow, letting his tires crunch easy over the wet stones, and cut the engine. For a second, he just sat there, rain dripping off his helmet, watching the light spill out from the open bay doors where his brothers moved boxes into the back of a plain white truck that said nothing about who it belonged to or where it was going. That was the whole point. Nothing about that truck was supposed to say anything. He swung off his bike and walked in like it was any other night. That was the trick of it he'd learned a long time ago. You didn't walk into a room already looking for the wolf. You walked in easy, you smiled, you let your eyes do the work quiet, while your face stayed calm as still water. "Preacher," called Tiny, a barrel of a man near the truck, hefting a box of bandages like it weighed nothing. "You're soaked through, man. Rough ride." "Rain's rain," Marcus said, clapping him on the shoulder as he passed. "You get the manifest checked twice?" "Twice," Tiny said. "Same as always." Marcus nodded and kept walking, past Reggie and Boone loading crates of insulin packed in coolers, past Sam, who was double-checking straps on the truck bed, his eyes flicking over every face like he was reading a book he'd read 100 times before. Except tonight, he was looking for a page that didn't belong. 22 years he'd known Tiny, never missed a shift, never asked for more than his share. Reggie had come up through the club after Marcus vouched for him personally, back when Reggie was nothing but a scared kid running from a bad home. Boone kept to himself. Quiet, steady, the kind of man who fixed engines instead of talking about his feelings. None of them fit. None of them felt right in the shape of a traitor. And then there was Danny. Danny Wheels Ferris stood near the back of the truck, checking the route sheet against a folded paper map, same as he did every single run. 10 years Danny had been road captain. 10 years of quiet reliability. Never flashy, never loud, always just there, doing the work nobody noticed because he did it so well nobody had to think about it twice. Marcus watched him a moment longer than he meant to. Danny felt it, must have, because he looked up, offering a small nod. "Route's clear," he said. "Same as last time, cut through on 9, then swing north past the old mill." "Good," Marcus said, keeping his voice even, keeping his face the same face he always wore. But something in his gut had gone tight and cold again, the same feeling from the diner, the same feeling that had settled into him like a stone dropped in still water, rippling out slow. He couldn't say why. Nothing about Danny looked wrong. But something about the way Danny held that map, the way his eyes didn't quite settle anywhere, nagged at Marcus in a place he couldn't name yet. He walked the length of the truck once more, checking straps that didn't need checking, running his hand along the cold metal, buying himself time to think. 25 years of riding, and instinct told him something wasn't right about tonight. Instinct told him to trust nobody until he had reason to. "Change of plans?" Marcus said suddenly, loud enough that every man in the bay turned to look at him. "We're taking the old river road instead. Cut west past Miller's Creek before we come back up to 9. Silence settled over the group for a beat. Tiny frowned, confused. "That adds near 40 minutes, preacher." "I know what it adds," Marcus said, calm, final. "We're doing it anyway." Nobody argued with him. Nobody ever did when his voice took that tone. But Marcus wasn't watching their mouths. He was watching their eyes, their hands, the way their shoulders sat. Tiny just shrugged and went back to loading. Reggie looked mildly annoyed but said nothing. Boone didn't even look up from his work. Danny's hand tightened on the folded map, just slightly, just enough that Marcus caught it. His jaw worked once, like he wanted to ask why, and then didn't. "Everything all right?" Marcus asked him directly, watching close. "Fine," Danny said too quick. "Just tired, long week." Marcus held his gaze a second longer, then nodded and let it go, telling himself it was nothing. Late hours did that to a man, made him jumpy, made his hands unsteady over things that didn't matter. He turned back toward the truck, calling out the new route to the others, pushing the thought of Danny's tight jaw down deep, where it wouldn't slow him down tonight. The rain had stopped by the time Marcus rode back into the gravel lot of the Rosalie Diner, 3 nights after the shipment made it safely to the clinic. The sky had cleared to a deep blue, the kind that came right before full dark, and the diner's neon sign buzzed pink and blue against it, same as always. Marcus parked his bike near the door and sat there a moment, same as he had before, letting the quiet settle around him. Inside, the diner was near empty, just an old trucker nursing a slice of pie in one booth and a young couple splitting fries in another. Behind the counter, Della moved slow, like her feet had given up arguing with her a long time ago. Her dark hair had come loose from its tie, strands sticking to her forehead, and there were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there the first night Marcus had met her. She looked up when the bell over the door rang, and something in her face eased when she saw it was him. Not a smile, exactly. More like relief. "You made it back," she said, grabbing a mug from the stack without needing to ask. "I was starting to wonder." "Told you I would." Marcus took his usual seat at the counter, the same stool as before. "Everything went smooth. Clinic got what it needed. Nobody got hurt." Della poured his coffee, her hand steady, even though the rest of her looked like it might fall over if the wind blew wrong. "Good," she said, and there was something real in the word, not just politeness. "I've been thinking about it, hoping." "You saved more than you know," Marcus said, watching her. "I mean that." She waved it off, the way people do when they don't know how to hold on to a compliment. "You want food? I can get Charlie to fire up the grill." "Just coffee's fine. You look done in, Della." She let out a breath that was almost a laugh, but tired, worn thin. "Covered a double. Rosa called in sick again, and it's just me and Charlie most nights now anyway." She leaned against the counter, like she needed it to hold her up. "I keep telling myself one more shift, one more paycheck, and then I'll sleep for a week. Never happens, though." Marcus turned the mug slow between his hands, feeling the heat of it. "Your dad? Are you the reason you're picking up all this extra?" Della's eyes flicked to him, surprised he'd remembered, or maybe surprised he'd asked outright. "Yeah," she said after a second. "Ray, my father. His heart's not doing so good. Been in and out of the hospital these past 6 months. Insurance covers some, but not all. And the specialist he needs to see is 2 hours away. And every time we go, it's another bill I don't know how I'm going to pay." "That's a heavy thing to carry alone," Marcus said quietly. "Somebody's got to carry it." She said it simple. No self-pity in it, just fact, the way a person says the sky is blue. "He raised me by himself after my mom left. Worked 2 jobs half my childhood so I'd never go without. Least I can do is make sure he's not scared about how the bills get paid." Marcus studied her a long moment, the exhaustion carved into her face, the way she still stood straight despite it, still poured his coffee steady, despite whatever weight sat on her chest at night. He thought of the note folded under his saucer that first night. The risk she'd taken for a stranger in leather she owed nothing to. "You didn't have to warn me," he said. "That night, could have just let it happen, kept your head down, stayed out of it." Della shrugged, like it hadn't been a choice at all. "Didn't feel right, letting something bad happen to a man just 'cause it wasn't my business. My daddy raised me better than that." Something shifted in Marcus's chest, warm and heavy at once. 25 years riding with the club. And here was a woman working herself to the bone for her father, still finding room to risk her own safety for a stranger's sake. That kind of goodness didn't come around often. Not the real kind. Not the kind that expected nothing back. "Listen," he said, setting his mug down. "I want to keep in touch. Not just tonight. I want to know you're safe. You and your father both. You gave me a warning when you didn't have to. Least I can do is make sure somebody's looking out for you too." Della didn't say anything to that, just nodded once, like she was filing it away someplace safe. Marcus finished his coffee and left a bigger tip than the bill called for, same as he'd done the last few nights, and neither one of them made a thing of it. He came back the next night, and the night after that. It got to be a habit neither of them named out loud. Marcus would finish up whatever business the club had going, then point his bike toward the Rosalie Diner instead of home. Some nights the place was busy, and Della could only steal a few minutes between orders. Other nights it was slow enough that she'd lean against the counter across from him, and they'd talk until the old trucker in the corner booth finished his coffee and shuffled out into the dark. He learned things about her in pieces. That she'd wanted to be a nurse once, before her father got sick, and the money for school turned into money for hospital bills instead. That she made the best pancakes in 3 counties, according to Charlie the cook, though she always said that was just Charlie being nice because she covered his shifts when his knees acted up. That she laughed more than her tired eyes let on. A real laugh, quick and surprised, like it caught her off guard every time. She learned things about him too. That the name preacher didn't come from anything holy, just from a habit he had of talking men down instead of letting fists fly. That he'd been riding for 25 years and couldn't remember much of who he was before that. That underneath the leather and the ink on his arms was a man who worried about doing right by people, same as anybody. It was on a Thursday, 6 days after the shipment had made it safe to the clinic, that Della's easy chatter stopped mid-sentence. She was refilling his mug, and her hand went still over the pot. Marcus followed her gaze toward the door, where a man in a denim jacket had just walked in, bell jangling above him. Middle-aged, thick through the shoulders, a faded tattoo creeping up from his collar. He took a booth near the back, same one from that first night, and pulled out his phone without even glancing at a menu. "That's him," Della said quietly, setting the pot down slow, careful not to draw eyes. "One of the 2 from before. I never forget a face, especially not one that made my stomach turn like his did." Marcus didn't turn to look, not right away. 25 years of riding had taught him better than that. He waited a beat, then let his eyes drift over like he was checking the parking lot, and caught the man in his side vision instead. Thick neck, restless hands, the kind of man who looked like trouble even when he was just waiting on a cup of coffee. "You're sure?" Marcus said. "Sure as I've ever been sure of anything." Della's voice had dropped low, just for him. "He's got a scar right along his jaw, see it? Same one I noticed that night. Some things you just don't forget, no matter how much you want to." Marcus felt something cold slide down his spine, but he kept his face easy, kept his hands wrapped calm around his mug. "He say anything? Notice anything?" Della shook her head, but her eyes stayed fixed on the booth, watching without watching, the way she'd learned to do from years of reading trouble before it walked in the door. She busied herself wiping down the counter, drifting closer to that back section under the excuse of clearing an empty table nearby. When she came back, her face had changed, gone pale under the diner's buzzing lights. "He was on the phone," she said, voice barely above a whisper now, leaning in close so only Marcus could hear. Talking low, but I caught some of it clearing that table. He said a name. Marcus set his mug down, careful, controlled, though everything in his chest had gone tight and cold. "What name?" Della's eyes met his, steady despite the fear in them. "Wheels," she said. He said it twice, like it mattered. The word hit Marcus like a fist to the ribs. Danny, his road captain, the man who'd ridden beside him for 10 years, planned every safe route the club had ever taken, sat across from him at 100 campfires, and never once given him a reason to doubt. Marcus didn't say anything for a long moment. He just sat there with his hands flat on the counter, staring at the steam rising off his coffee, like it might tell him something the rest of the world wouldn't. Danny Ferris. Wheels! The name kept turning over in his head, slow and heavy, like a wheel stuck in mud. He thought back to the first time Danny had ridden with the club, a skinny kid barely 20, nervous hands on the handlebars, always double-checking his mirrors like he was scared of getting left behind. Marcus had liked him right off. Quiet, careful, the kind of man who thought before he spoke, which was rare enough in a room full of loud voices and louder egos. Over the years, Danny had become the man everybody trusted with the maps, the timing, the little details nobody else wanted to bother with. He knew every back road in 3 states. He could read weather like scripture. He never asked for credit, never made a show of what he did. And maybe that was the problem, Marcus thought now. Maybe all those years of quiet service had worn a hole in him that nobody noticed, least of all Marcus himself. He remembered a night 2 winters back, out at the clubhouse, when Danny had a few too many beers and let something slip. They'd been talking about who might take over as VP when old Hollis stepped down, and Danny had gone quiet, staring into his cup. 10 years, he'd muttered. 10 years I've been planning every run this club's made, and nobody ever once thought to put my name up for anything. Marcus had laughed it off at the time, clapped him on the shoulder, told him leadership wasn't about titles, it was about what a man did when nobody was watching. Danny had smiled and nodded and let it go. But now, sitting in the diner with Della's words still ringing in his ears, Marcus wondered if letting it go had only meant burying it deeper. He thought about Tank and Reyes, the loud ones, the ones who got slapped on the back at every meeting, who told the stories that got repeated around the fire. Danny had never begrudged them out loud, not once. But there'd been something in his eyes sometimes, watching them get the attention, the respect, the years he'd earned and never collected. Was it enough to make a man betray his own club? Marcus didn't want to believe it. 25 years of reading people, and every instinct in him wanted to throw this thought out the window and call it foolishness. Danny wasn't built like that. Danny was steady. Danny was the one you trusted with your life on a dark road at 90 miles an hour. But then again, Marcus thought, his own gut twisting. Wasn't that exactly the kind of man who'd snap quiet instead of loud? The kind who wouldn't come to you with his hurt? Who'd let it fester until it turned into something ugly? He rubbed a hand over his face, feeling older than his 45 years. Marcus. Della's voice pulled him back. She was watching him close, the way she always did, like she could read the weather changing behind his eyes. You gone someplace far off? Just thinking, he said. About Wheels? He nodded slow. Can't go accusing a man of something like this without proof. Not to the club, not even to Danny's face. If I'm wrong, I could tear us apart over nothing. And if I'm right—" He didn't finish that thought out loud. Della leaned against the counter, arms crossed, studying him. "So what do we do?" Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a small phone. A cheap thing, the kind you bought with cash and threw away when you were done with it. He set it on the counter between them. "If that man comes back," he said, "or anybody else who looks like trouble, you call me. Doesn't matter what time it is. Doesn't matter if you're not sure. You call and I'll come." Della picked up the phone, turning it over in her hands like it weighed more than it looked. "You trust me with this?" "I trust you," Marcus said, "more than I trust most men I've known for years." The afternoon sun hit the diner windows at a low slant, turning the grease-stained glass gold. Della was wiping down the counter for the third time, more out of habit than need, when she saw the truck pull into the far corner of the lot. She knew that truck. Everybody who worked the diner knew that truck. An old blue Ford with a dented tailgate and a Hell's Angel sticker faded almost white in the back window. Danny Ferris always parked it in the same spot, same angle, like he'd measured it out with a ruler. But he wasn't coming inside. Della paused, rag still in her hand, and watched him through the window. Danny sat behind the wheel, both hands gripping it tight even though the truck wasn't moving. His head was down. His shoulders were pulled up around his ears like a man trying to make himself smaller. Then she saw the phone. It was cheap-looking, the kind of flip phone nobody used anymore unless they didn't want to be traced. He held it close to his face, and even through the glass, even with the sound of the diner's old radio playing behind her, Della could tell he wasn't having an easy conversation. His mouth moved fast. His free hand chopped at the air like he was trying to explain something to somebody who wasn't buying it. Every few seconds he'd glance up, eyes scanning the lot, the road, the diner windows, like he was checking to see if anyone was watching. Della stepped back from the window, heart thudding hard against her ribs. She didn't want him to see her looking. She grabbed a stack of napkins and pretended to busy herself wiping down the table by the window, angling herself so she could still catch him from the corner of her eye without looking too obvious. Danny's face had gone pale. Even from this distance, she could see the sweat on his forehead, the way his jaw kept clenching and unclenching. He looked like a man being squeezed from the inside out. She caught a few words through the thin glass when the wind was right. "I told you, I can't. Not like this. You said nobody would." Her stomach turned cold. She didn't wait to hear more. She slipped behind the counter, pulled the little burner phone from her apron pocket where she kept it hidden, and typed as fast as her thumbs would let her. "Danny's here. Parking lot. On a phone, looks scared, arguing with someone. Hurry." She hit send and shoved the phone back in her pocket, glancing up just in time to see Danny snap the flip phone shut and toss it onto the passenger seat like it had burned him. He sat there another moment, both hands over his face, and Della thought for a second he might actually be crying. Then he started the truck and pulled out of the lot, fast, tires kicking up gravel, and he was gone before she could even think about what to do next. Marcus arrived 12 minutes later. She heard his bike before she saw it. That low, familiar rumble that had become as much a part of the diner's soundtrack these past weeks as the bell over the door or the hum of the old ice machine. He parked crooked, in a hurry, and came through the door with his eyes already scanning the lot behind him. "Where is he?" Marcus asked, breathless in a way Della hadn't heard from him before. "Gone," she said. "Left maybe 10 minutes ago. Peeled out of here like the devil was chasing him." Marcus's jaw tightened. He walked to the window and looked out at the empty spot where the blue truck had been, like staring hard enough might bring it back. "Tell me everything," he said. "Don't leave anything out." So she did. She told him about the way Danny had gripped the wheel like it was the only solid thing in the world, about the phone, cheap and disposable, the kind you didn't want traced back to you, about his face, pale as the inside of a shell, sweat beading at his temples even though the day wasn't that warm. She told him about the words she'd caught on the wind. "I can't. Not like this. You said nobody would." And watched Marcus's face go still and hard as stone. "He looked scared," Della said again, quieter now. "Not guilty scared, trapped scared, like a man who already knows he's in too deep and can't find the way back out." Marcus didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at the empty parking spot, his hands curling slowly into fists at his sides. The clubhouse sat off a gravel road 2 miles outside town. A converted garage with steel siding and a gravel lot that always smelled like motor oil and cigarette smoke. Marcus rode in slow, letting the engine idle down before he cut it. He needed a minute. He needed his face to stop looking like a man who'd just heard something that scared him. 25 years he'd been riding with these men. 25 years of knowing who to trust with his life on a dark highway. He wasn't going to throw that away on a hunch. Not even a hunch that sat in his gut like a swallowed stone. Danny's truck was already parked outside. Same corner spot, same careful angle. Marcus felt his jaw tighten looking at it. He made himself relax his face before he walked in. Inside, a few of the brothers were scattered around the old couches, somebody's radio playing low country music, the smell of coffee burning on the hot plate in the corner. Danny sat at the long table by himself, going over a paper map of back roads, the kind he always used for route planning, even though half the club had GPS on their phones now. "Wheels," Marcus said, keeping his voice easy, dropping into the chair across from him like he did most days. "You mapping out Thursday's run?" Danny's pen stopped moving for just a second. Just a second, but Marcus caught it. "Yeah," Danny said. "Same route as last time. Figured no reason to change it." "Any trouble out that way lately? Heard some talk about extra patrols near the county line." "Nah." Danny didn't look up. "Nothing like that? Same as always?" Marcus nodded slow, watching him. Danny's hands were steady on the pen, but his shoulders were pulled up tight, the same way Della had described him behind the wheel of that truck. Marcus kept his tone light, like they were just 2 old friends talking about nothing important. "You look tired," Marcus said. "Everything good with you?" "I'm fine." The answer came too fast, too flat. Danny finally looked up, and there was something behind his eyes, something cornered. "Why you asking?" "Just making conversation." Marcus shrugged, easy as anything. "We've known each other a long time, Danny. I can tell when a man's carrying something heavy." Danny's jaw worked like he was chewing on words before he let them out. "I'm just tired. Long week, that's all it is." "Sure." Marcus let it sit there a moment, let the silence stretch just long enough to feel uncomfortable. "You still good for the clinic run? I know it's a lot of driving, and if you need a break, we can rotate somebody else in." That got a reaction. Danny's head snapped up fast, too fast. No, I got it. I always do the clinic runs. Why would that change?" "Just offering," Marcus said, keeping his voice mild, watching the way Danny's hand had gone still on the map, fingers pressed flat like he was holding something down. "I don't need anybody else doing my job," Danny said, and there was an edge in it now, sharp and defensive, nothing like the quiet, steady man Marcus had ridden beside for 10 years. "I've done every run since we started this. I know those roads better than anybody." "I know you do," Marcus said. "Nobody's saying otherwise." Danny looked down at the map again, but his eyes weren't tracking the lines anymore. He was somewhere else, somewhere far from that table, and whatever was chewing at him from the inside had pulled the color from his face same as it had in that parking lot. Marcus sat with him a while longer, talking about nothing. Weather and old rides, and a story about a flat tire from 3 years back that used to make them both laugh. Danny laughed too, but it sounded thin, like a man going through motions he no longer felt. When Marcus finally got up to leave, he clapped a hand on Danny's shoulder, the same as he'd done 1,000 times before. Danny flinched, just barely, just enough. Marcus walked out to his bike without saying anything else, but his mind was already moving fast, turning over every twitch and every too-quick answer. That night, he called 3 men, the 3 he trusted more than his own reflection, and told them to meet him someplace quiet, someplace with no chance of Danny Ferris ever knowing they'd spoken at all. The clinic sat at the end of a long dirt road, a squat brick building with a hand-painted sign out front that read, Cedar County Community Clinic. The paint was peeling at the edges. One of the windows had a crack running through it, patched with silver tape that had gone brown at the edges from the sun. Marcus pulled his bike into the gravel lot just as the sky was turning pink behind the tree line. 2 other bikes followed close behind, Tommy and Big Sal, the 2 men he trusted with his life, and now with this secret too. The truck came in last, the one carrying the boxes, driven by a prospect named Curtis, who didn't ask questions and didn't need to. Della sat in the truck's passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, looking out the window at the building like she wasn't sure what she was supposed to feel yet. "You didn't have to come," Marcus told her when she climbed down, boots crunching on the gravel. "I wanted to," she said. "I've been hearing about this place for days. Figured I should see it with my own eyes." The clinic door opened before they reached it, and a woman stepped out onto the small concrete stoop, wiping her hands on her white coat. Dr. Amelia Hayes was maybe 50 years old, with gray, streaked hair pulled back tight and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many long nights. When she saw the truck, when she saw the boxes stacked in the back through the open flap, her hand went to her mouth. "Oh," she said, and her voice cracked on the single word. "Oh, thank God." She came down the steps fast, moving quicker than her tired frame looked capable of, and threw her arms around Marcus before he could even get a word out. He stood there a second, surprised, then patted her back gently, the way he might comfort a scared kid. "We got insulin," Marcus said. "Bandages, gauze, some of the blood pressure medication you asked about. Tommy tracked down a box of the antibiotics, too. Wasn't easy, but he found them." Dr. Hayes pulled back, swiping at her eyes with the back of her wrist. "You don't understand. We lost our state funding in March. I've been rationing insulin to patients who need it every single day. I had a woman in here last week, 62 years old, and I had to tell her I could only give her half of what she needed until the next shipment came in." Half. Do you know what that does to a person, hearing that from their doctor? "I can't imagine," Della said quietly, stepping up beside Marcus. Dr. Hayes looked at her, taking her in for the first time. "This is Della," Marcus said. "She's a friend." "Well, friend of Marcus's is a friend of mine," Dr. Hayes said, managing a small, tired smile. Come in, all of you. Let me show you what this means." Inside, the clinic was small but clean. Waiting room chairs mismatched but wiped down. A hand-lettered sign taped to the front desk that read, "We are still open. Thank you for your patience." A few patients sat waiting. An old man with a cane, a young mother holding a sleeping toddler. They looked up as the group walked in, and something in their tired faces shifted when they saw the boxes being carried through the door. Marcus watched Della's face as she took it all in. She wasn't saying much, but her eyes were moving over everything. The peeling paint, the patched window, the hopeful, exhausted faces of the people waiting for care they couldn't get anywhere else. "This is why we do it," Marcus said low, just for her. "Nobody knows. Not even most of my own guys know the full truth of it. We tell them it's supplies for a shelter, keep it vague. Only a few of us know it comes here." Della turned to look at him. "Why keep it secret?" "Because the world's already decided what men like me are," Marcus said. "Didn't figure changing their minds was worth the risk of somebody exploiting this place, or exploiting us for doing it. Easier to just do the good quiet and let it be its own reward." Della was quiet for a moment, watching Dr. Hayes direct Tommy and Sal toward a back storage room, her voice full of instructions and gratitude in equal measure. "I think," Della said slowly, "this might be the best thing I've ever seen." Marcus felt something warm settle in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long while. Pride, maybe, or purpose. Standing there in that little clinic with the woman who'd risked her own safety to warn him, watching his secret finally mean something to somebody who understood it, he felt lighter than he had in weeks. "Yeah," he said, watching the old man with the cane get called back for his appointment, watching the young mother's shoulders relax just slightly. "Yeah, it might be." The sun had gone down hard by the time Danny Ferris parked his bike behind the old grain elevator on Route 9, a place nobody used anymore except teenagers looking to drink where their parents couldn't find them. He'd picked the spot himself, far enough from the clubhouse that nobody would recognize the engine, close enough that he could be back before anyone noticed he was gone. His hands were shaking when he killed the engine. He told himself it was the cold. 2 trucks were already waiting, headlights off, parked in the shadow of the grain elevator's crumbling silo. Danny counted 4 men as he walked up, though he knew there were probably more he couldn't see. The one in front, a broad man with a shaved head and a scar cutting through his eyebrow, stepped forward with his hands in his jacket pockets. "Ferris," the man said. "Wasn't sure you'd actually show." "Said I would." Danny's voice came out steadier than he felt. "I keep my word." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's good. That's real good, Danny. Loyalty's worth something out here." Danny had told himself all week that this was smart, that feeding these men something, some scrap of information, some detail that sounded important but wasn't, would prove he had value. Prove he wasn't just Marcus's quiet shadow, the guy who planned routes and kept his mouth shut while Tommy and Sal got the respect, the stories, the nods from the younger prospects. He'd spent 10 years being useful and invisible at the same time. He was tired of being invisible. "I got something for you," Danny said. "About the shipment, the one everybody's been asking about." The scarred man's eyebrows lifted just slightly. "Go on." "It's not weapons," Danny said, the words coming out faster now, like if he stopped, he might lose his nerve. "It's not drugs either. It's medical supplies, clinic stuff, insulin, bandages, that kind of thing. Goes to a clinic 2 counties over, place called Cedar County. Been running it for years. Almost nobody in the club even knows the truth of it." He'd meant for it to sound big. Instead, standing there in the dark, with the wind cutting through his jacket, it sounded small. Pathetic, even. A secret about bandages and blood pressure medicine. The scarred man was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed, low and mean, and the men behind him laughed too, the sound spreading through the group like something catching fire. "That's it?" the man said. "That's the big secret? The great and mighty Hells Angels are running a charity operation for a country doctor?" Danny's stomach dropped. "It's not nothing. It's information. You said you wanted information." "I wanted something I could use, Ferris. Something that'd let us take territory, embarrass your club, make Preacher look like a fool in front of the whole state. You're telling me the big secret is that your boys deliver medicine to sick people?" The man shook his head, disgust curling his lip. "You're either lying to us, or you're too stupid to know what real information looks like. Either way, you just wasted our time." "I'm not lying," Danny said, panic rising in his throat. "I swear that's the truth. That's everything I know." "You think we're going to respect a man who sells out his own brothers for nothing?" The scarred man stepped closer, close enough that Danny could smell the cigarette smoke on his breath. "You disgust me, Ferris. Come in here, groveling, trying to buy your way into looking tough. You're nothing. You were nothing before you walked over here, and you're nothing now." "Wait," Danny said, backing up a step. "Wait, I can get you something else. I can find out more. Just give me—" The first punch caught him in the jaw before he finished the sentence. He went down hard, gravel biting into his palms as he tried to catch himself, and then the boots came, one after another from every direction it seemed, and Danny curled up instinctively, arms over his head, gasping out words that nobody was listening to anymore. The scarred man crouched down beside him at some point, grabbed a fistful of his hair, and pulled his head up. "Tell your preacher," the man said, voice cold as the night air, "that we know exactly who his real friends are, and they ain't worth protecting." Then he let go, and the boots kept coming until the world went dark and quiet, and Danny Ferris lay broken on the side of Route 9, the wind picking up dust around him like the desert didn't care at all what had just happened. The phone rang at 11:40 in the clubhouse, and Marcus almost let it go to voicemail. He was tired. He'd been tired for weeks, carrying the weight of his suspicions like a stone in his gut, watching Danny across the room at meetings and hating himself for the watching. He picked it up on the fourth ring. "Preacher." It was Sal's voice, tight and strange. "You need to get out to Route 9, by the old mill road past the grain elevator. It's Danny. Man, it's bad." "What do you mean, bad?" Marcus was already moving, grabbing his keys off the hook by the door. "I mean somebody worked him over good. I found him laying in the ditch. He ain't talking right. You need to come now." Marcus didn't remember the ride. Later he would try to piece it together. The wet roads, the rain that had started somewhere around Miller's Creek, the way his headlight cut through the dark like a blade. But in the moment, there was only the destination. Only Danny's name repeating itself in his head like a prayer he didn't know how to finish. He saw the flashing hazards first, Sal's truck parked crooked on the shoulder, and then he saw Sal himself, kneeling in the gravel with his jacket off, pressed against something on the ground. Marcus's bike skidded to a stop, and he was off it before the engine had even finished dying. "Danny." The word came out of him broken, barely a whisper, swallowed by the rain. Danny Ferris lay on his side in the mud, one arm bent underneath him at an angle that made Marcus's stomach turn. His face was a ruin, both eyes swollen nearly shut, his lips split wide, blood mixing with rainwater and running down into the collar of his jacket. His breathing came in short, wet gasps. Like every breath cost him something he didn't have enough of. Marcus dropped to his knees beside him, not caring about the mud soaking through his jeans. Danny, can you hear me?" Danny's eyes fluttered, found Marcus's face, and something in them, some flicker of recognition, made a sound climb up out of his throat that wasn't quite a word. It sounded like sorry. It sounded like it cost him everything he had left. "Don't talk," Marcus said, his voice cracking despite himself. "Don't you talk. Save it." Sal was already on the phone with 911, giving the dispatcher the location in a voice that shook more than Marcus had ever heard from him. Marcus pulled off his own jacket and laid it over Danny's chest. An instinct more than a decision. Something to hold the warmth in, something to do with his hands besides shake. "Who did this?" Marcus said. Not really a question, more like a demand thrown out into the rain. "Danny, who did this to you?" Danny's mouth moved. No sound came out at first, just a rattle of breath, and then, barely audible, 2 words. "I'm sorry." Marcus felt something crack open in his chest, wide and terrible. He thought of the burner phone Della had spotted outside the diner. He thought of every quiet dinner, every time Danny had gone still when Marcus brought up the shipment schedules, every small hesitation he'd talked himself out of noticing because he hadn't wanted it to be true. All of it came rushing back at once, a flood he couldn't hold back anymore. The sirens arrived a few minutes later, red and blue light bouncing off the wet asphalt, off the rusted grain elevator standing silent behind them, like a witness that would never tell what it saw. The paramedics moved fast, careful hands lifting Danny onto a stretcher, calling out numbers to each other that Marcus didn't understand, and didn't want to. He watched them load his road captain into the ambulance, watched the doors close, watched the taillights disappear down Route 9 toward the hospital in Hartwell. Then he just stood there. The rain kept falling, soaking through his shirt, running down his neck, and Marcus didn't move to stop it. Sal said something to him, asked if he was going to follow the ambulance, but the words seemed to come from very far away. All he could think about was every moment he'd suspected Danny, and said nothing. Every night he'd sat across from him at the clubhouse table, searching his face for guilt, and told himself he was wrong to look. He had wanted so badly not to believe it. And now here was the truth. Lying broken in an ambulance, bleeding out because somewhere along the way, a good man had wanted so badly to matter that he'd handed his own brothers to wolves. The clubhouse smelled like burnt coffee and old smoke, the same as it always did. But the air felt different that morning. Wrong. Heavy in a way Marcus had never felt in 25 years of walking through that door. Word had already spread by the time he got there. He could tell by the way the room went quiet when he stepped inside, wet jacket still smelling like rain and mud from the night before. His eyes red from no sleep. Big Tom was the first to speak, pushing up from his chair so fast it scraped hard against the concrete floor. "Preacher, we heard. Sal told us everything. We need to roll out right now, tonight, and show these sons of bitches what happens when they touch one of ours." A chorus of voices rose up behind him, angry, loud, full of the kind of heat that Marcus knew could burn a man's good sense right out of him. Fists on tables, boots stomping the floor. Someone shouted about grabbing the shotguns from the back room. "Sit down," Marcus said. His voice wasn't loud, but something in it cut through the noise anyway. Tom didn't sit. "Preacher, they beat Danny half to death and left him in a ditch like garbage. You want us to just let that slide?" "I didn't say let it slide." Marcus walked further into the room, past the pool table, past the old jukebox that hadn't worked right in years. I said, "Sit down." Slowly, grudgingly, the room settled, though the anger didn't leave. It just went quiet, simmering under the surface like a pot about to boil over. That was when Ricky, one of the younger members, stood up near the back. He was maybe 26, still had something to prove, and Marcus could see it in the set of his jaw. "There's something else," Ricky said. "Sal told me what he heard the paramedics say. Danny was talking before they loaded him up. Kept saying sorry, over and over, sorry, sorry, sorry." The room shifted again, confusion rippling through it now. "What's that supposed to mean?" someone asked. Ricky looked at Marcus, and Marcus felt his stomach drop, because he knew what was coming, and he knew he couldn't stop it from coming out. "It means Danny sold us out," Ricky said. "It means our road captain has been talking to those bastards for weeks, maybe longer. It means the beating wasn't some ambush. It was them turning on their own snitch." The room exploded. Marcus had seen bar fights break out slower than the fury that tore through his brothers in that moment. Men who had ridden beside Danny for years, who had trusted him with their lives on the road, now shouting for his head. Someone called him a traitor. Someone else said he should be stripped of his patch the second he woke up in that hospital bed, if he woke up at all. Big Tom, red-faced, said Danny didn't deserve the angel's name stitched anywhere near him ever again. "He's not even conscious, and you're ready to hang him," Marcus said. But his words got swallowed in the noise, drowned out by 20 men all talking over each other, all certain they knew exactly what justice looked like. Marcus felt the two forces pulling at him from opposite directions, same as they had been pulling at him for weeks now. The club's code was simple. Betrayal meant exile, or worse. He had enforced that code before, had believed in it, had watched men expelled for far less than what Danny had done. But he kept seeing Danny's face in the mud, swollen and broken, kept hearing that word rattle out of his throat like it was the last thing holding him together. Sorry. Not an excuse. A man drowning in his own shame. Marcus slammed his open palm down on the table so hard the ashtray jumped and clattered to the floor. The room went silent. "Enough," Marcus said, and this time his voice filled every corner of the clubhouse, low and hard as iron. "Nobody rides out tonight. Nobody touches Danny when he wakes up. Nobody says one more word about patches or expulsion or payback." "Preacher, he betrayed us," Tom said, quieter now, but still burning. "I know what he did." Marcus looked around the room, meeting every set of eyes that would meet his. "And I will handle it. Me, not the club, not a vote, not a mob with shotguns in the back of somebody's truck. Me." Nobody argued. Nobody moved. "Go home," Marcus said. "Sleep it off. I need time to think, and none of you are going to take that away from me." The call came in during the slow stretch of the afternoon, right between lunch and dinner when the diner sat mostly empty, and the light through the windows turned everything the color of weak tea. Della was rolling silverware into paper napkins, the same motion she'd done 10,000 times, when her phone buzzed against the counter. It was Dr. Patterson's office. Ray's doctor. She stepped into the back hallway by the walk-in cooler, the only place with any privacy, and pressed the phone to her ear. The nurse on the other end had a kind voice, the kind that people used when they were about to say something that wasn't kind at all. "Della, we got Ray's latest test results back. His heart function has dropped again. Dr. Patterson wants him to see a cardiac specialist as soon as possible. There's a good one at Mercy General in the city, but we don't have anybody like that out here." Della's hand found the wall and pressed flat against it, like she needed something solid to keep her upright. "How soon is as soon as possible?" "This week, if we can manage it. His numbers aren't good, Della. I'm sorry." She thanked the nurse in a voice that didn't sound like her own, then hung up and stood there in the narrow hallway, staring at a stain on the ceiling tile that had been there longer than she'd worked at the diner. The cooler hummed beside her. Somewhere out front, a customer laughed at something, easy and light, like the world hadn't just tilted sideways. The city. Mercy General was 2 hours away, maybe more with traffic. A specialist meant more tests, more bills stacked on top of the ones already drowning her, and it meant somebody had to drive Ray there and sit with him and bring him home again, over and over for however long it took. It meant time off work she couldn't afford to take, because every hour she didn't work was an hour she couldn't pay the electric bill or the mortgage on the little house her father had raised her in. She thought about her savings, the thin envelope of cash tucked behind a loose board in her closet, money she'd been trying to build for 2 years and had never gotten past a few $100s before some new expense ate through it. She thought about leaving town, staying near the specialist in some cheap motel, missing shifts, maybe losing the job altogether. She thought about her father's face, proud and stubborn, and how he'd probably tell her not to bother, that he'd lived a good, long life already, which only made her chest hurt worse. Della slid down the wall until she was sitting on an overturned milk crate, knees pulled up, phone still clutched in her hand. She didn't cry. She'd learned a long time ago that crying didn't fix anything, didn't pay anything, didn't drive anybody anywhere. But her hands were shaking, and her breath kept catching in her throat like something was stuck there. She thought about calling her cousin in Phoenix, who never had money to spare. She thought about the church down the road, which had already helped her once and couldn't be expected to help again. She thought about all the people she could call, and how none of them could actually do anything. Then, without really deciding to, her thumb found the number Marcus had given her weeks ago. The burner phone he'd said was only for emergencies, only for club business, only if something about the shipment or the danger came up. This wasn't club business. This was just her, falling apart in the back hallway of a diner, needing to hear a voice that wasn't going to tell her everything would be fine when it clearly wasn't. She almost put the phone away 3 times before she finally pressed call. He picked up on the second ring, his voice low and rough, like he'd been carrying something heavy all day. "Della, everything okay?" And that was all it took. The dam broke, and she found herself telling him everything: the specialist, the money, the fear of leaving her father to strangers or leaving town to strangers, the fear of losing everything at once. Her words tumbled out fast and messy, and she didn't even try to slow them down. Marcus listened. He didn't interrupt once. When she finally ran out of words, there was a pause on the line, just the sound of his breathing, steady and calm. "Della," he said finally, "we're gonna figure this out. I promise you that. Whatever it takes." Marcus told Della he'd call her back later that night, then set the burner phone on the seat of his truck and sat there for a long minute before he could make himself turn the key. 2 problems now pulled at him from opposite directions: Ray Ruiz fading in one direction and Danny Ferris broken in a hospital bed in the other. He didn't have room in his chest for both, but he didn't get to choose. That was the thing about being the one people called preacher. You didn't get to pick which fires you put out first. You just had to walk into all of them. The hospital smelled like every hospital does, like bleach trying to cover something it couldn't quite cover. Marcus walked down the hallway in his leather vest, and nurses looked twice, then looked away, the way people did when they saw a Hell's Angel and didn't know what to make of him standing in a place full of soft blankets and beeping machines. He didn't care. He'd stopped caring what strangers thought of him a long time ago. Danny's room was at the end of the hall, the door half open. Marcus paused outside it and looked in. Danny lay propped up on pillows, one eye swollen shut, purple and yellow bruising spread across the side of his face like a stain that wouldn't wash out. His arm was in a sling. A bandage wrapped around his ribs was visible where his hospital gown had slipped. He looked smaller than Marcus had ever seen him, smaller than a man who'd ridden beside him for 10 years had any right to look. Marcus stepped inside and pulled the plastic chair close to the bed and sat down without a word. Danny's good eye flicked toward him, then away, toward the window, toward the ceiling, anywhere but Marcus's face. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The machine beside the bed beeped steady, counting out the silence in little green numbers. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled past. Marcus folded his hands in his lap and waited, the way he'd learned to wait over 25 years of dealing with men who needed to talk but didn't know how to start. "They did a number on you," Marcus finally said. His voice wasn't hard. It wasn't soft either. It was just flat, the voice of a man setting down a fact and nothing more. Danny's jaw worked. His good eye filled up, but he blinked hard and looked at the ceiling instead of letting it fall. "Yeah," he said. His voice was cracked and dry. "Guess I had it coming." "Don't guess," Marcus said. "I didn't come here to guess with you, Danny. I came here to ask you something, and I want the truth. I've known you 10 years. I need to hear it from your mouth, not from some story I put together myself." Danny's hand, the one not in the sling, gripped the edge of the blanket like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to the bed. "Why?" Marcus said. Just the one word. He didn't need more than that. "Why'd you do it, Danny? The clinic, the shipment, talking to those men? Why?" The room stayed quiet so long, Marcus thought maybe Danny wouldn't answer at all, that the shame would just swallow the words before they ever made it out. But then Danny's shoulders started to shake. Small at first, then harder, and the sound that came out of him wasn't words. It was something closer to a sob, low and broken. A man finally letting go of something he'd been carrying alone for a long time. "I'm nobody, Marcus," Danny finally choked out. 10 years. 10 years I've been riding with you, planning every route, keeping the maps, keeping the schedules, and nobody ever remembers my name at church unless they need something fixed. You know what they call me behind my back? Wheels. Like I'm a part on a bike, not a person, a part. He wiped his good hand across his face, smearing it wet. Everybody else gets stories told about them. Big Mike and the bar fight in Reno. Tommy and the time he took a bullet in his shoulder and didn't even flinch. And me? I'm the guy who knows which back roads avoid the way stations. Nobody tells stories about that. His voice cracked further, breaking apart like ice on a pond. Those guys, they found me at a bar outside Tulsa, bought me a couple drinks, started asking questions, easy questions, like they were just curious. Made me feel like I mattered, like I had something worth knowing. I thought if I gave them a little something, just enough to look like I had access, like I was somebody with real weight in the club, they'd respect that. Respect me. I never thought they'd use it to hurt anybody. I never thought it'd go past talk. I swear to you, Marcus, I never wanted anybody hurt. Not the clinic, not the club, not you. Marcus sat with Danny a while longer, until the nurse came in to check the machines, and gave him a look that meant visiting hours were bending rules already. He squeezed Danny's good shoulder once, said nothing more, and walked back out into the hallway that smelled like bleach and fear. He didn't go straight to his truck. He walked past it, out to the little courtyard the hospital kept for people who needed air, a square of concrete with 2 benches and a sad little tree struggling up through a hole in the pavement. He sat down on the cold bench and let the night settle over him. 25 years. He thought about the boy he'd been when he first put on the vest. 20 years old and angry at the whole world, angry at a father who left, and a mother who worked herself into an early grave, and a system that never gave him a fair shake. He thought about the mistakes he made back then, the fights he started for no good reason, the time he'd nearly gotten a brother killed because he wanted to prove something to men who never once asked him to prove anything. He remembered Big Tom, dead now going on 10 years, the man who'd been road captain back then, pulling him aside after that mess and not throwing him out like the club bylaws said they should. Big Tom had looked at him with tired eyes and said, "Everybody's got one. One mistake that could have ended them. The question ain't whether you get one. The question is whether somebody's willing to stand next to you while you climb back out of it." Nobody had to give him that grace. He didn't earn it. He'd been reckless and selfish, and it could have cost the club everything. But Big Tom stood next to him anyway, and it was Big Tom who first started calling him preacher, not because Marcus quoted scripture or preached forgiveness with fancy words, but because after that, Marcus became the one who believed in second chances more than any man in the club. He'd carried that belief for 25 years. He couldn't set it down now just because it was hard. Danny wasn't evil. Danny was lonely and stupid in the particular way lonely men get stupid, wanting so bad to matter that he handed something precious to men who never meant to give him anything back. That wasn't the same as a man selling his brothers out of hate or greed. Marcus knew the difference. He'd lived both sides of that line once, a long time ago. He got up off the bench, feeling the cold in his knees the way he always did anymore, and walked to his truck. The engine turned over rough in the night air, and he pointed it toward the clubhouse. The lot was full when he pulled in, more bikes than usual, which meant word had already spread, and the church was in session without him. He walked through the door, and the room went quiet the second his boots hit the floor. Big Mike stood near the head of the table, red-faced, the kind of angry that comes from loyalty as much as rage. "Preacher," he said, "we were just talking about what to do with Wheels. Man sold us out. Some say expel him. Some say worse. I say we let the club vote." Marcus walked to the head of the table and stood there, letting his eyes move slow across every face in the room. Some looked ready to fight him on this before he even opened his mouth. Others just watched, waiting, the way men wait for a preacher to start his sermon. "Danny's not getting expelled," Marcus said, "and nobody's laying another hand on him. He's already paid a price higher than most of you would have survived." The room erupted, voices stacking on top of voices, Big Mike's fist coming down on the table hard enough to rattle the empty bottles. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He never did. "I said my piece," he said, and something in the flatness of it cut through the noise like a blade. "Danny made a mistake born out of feeling invisible in this club for 10 years. That's on him, and it's a little bit on all of us too, for never once telling him he mattered. He's going to get a chance to make it right. That's my call, and if any man here wants to challenge it, you challenge me, not him." Silence settled over the room. Some men shifted, unconvinced, jaws tight. But others, the older ones, the ones who remembered their own younger foolishness and the grace once shown to them, nodded slow, quiet respect passing between them and Marcus, without a single word needing to be said. The call came in 3 days later, while Danny was still in a hospital bed with wires taped to his chest and a cast holding his broken wrist together. Marcus took the call outside the clubhouse, standing under the busted porch light, and listened to Della's voice shaking on the other end. "A guy came into the diner tonight," she said. "Loud. Drunk enough to talk too much. He was bragging to his friend about how they're gonna call the newspapers and the sheriff's office both tomorrow night and hand over everything on your clinic runs. Said it'd be the end of the angels around here. Said their boss wants it to hit the 6 o'clock news." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Not for himself, for Amelia, for the clinic, for every family that depended on medicine that came in unmarked boxes nobody was supposed to ask about. If the rivals handed reporters a story about bikers hauling mystery shipments, nobody would wait around to hear the truth. The clinic would lose what little funding it clung to. Doors would close. People would suffer for something that was never a crime to begin with. He drove to the hospital that night instead of home. Danny was sitting up when Marcus walked in, more color in his face than there'd been in days, though the bruises still sat dark and yellow along his jaw. He looked at Marcus and straightened like a man bracing for another blow. "They're going public," Marcus said. "No greeting, no easing into it. Tomorrow night. Newspapers, cops, all of it. They're going to paint the clinic runs as something dirty and bury us before anybody can say different." Danny's jaw tightened. "That's my fault. All of it traces back to me." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but I didn't come here to make you feel it worse. I came because I need somebody who knows how these guys think. You talked to them. You know their patterns, don't you? Their names. Where they'd have to be to pull something like this off." Danny was quiet a moment. staring down at the cast on his wrist like it belonged to somebody else. Then something shifted in his face, something that looked less like shame and more like resolve. "Their leader's name is Reyes," he said. "He runs a chop shop outside of Callum, off Route 9. Everything stolen in 3 counties passes through there eventually. He's the one who'll want his name in the story, taking credit for taking the Angels down." Danny looked up. "If we go to the sheriff first, before the reporters get anything, and we give them Reyes instead, real evidence, real crimes, it flips the whole thing. Nobody cares about a rumor if the actual criminal's already in cuffs." "You have proof?" "I got texts, photos of the shop. I was supposed to be one of them, remember? I saw what they didn't think I was smart enough to notice." Danny swung his legs over the side of the bed, wincing, reaching for his boots with his good hand. "Let me do this, preacher. Not because I owe you. Because I want to be the one who fixes it instead of the one who broke it." Marcus studied him for a long moment. He could have told him no, could have handled it himself, kept Danny wrapped in bandages and out of danger. But he remembered Big Tom's voice from all those years ago, the weight of being given a chance to climb back out on his own strength instead of being carried. "You're still healing," Marcus said. "I'm healed enough to walk into a sheriff's office," Danny said. "That's all I need to be." They drove out that same night, Danny directing from the passenger seat with a folder of printed texts and photographs balanced on his lap, his splinted hand resting on top of it like he was afraid the wind might steal it away. They didn't go to the clubhouse first. They went straight to the county sheriff's office, walked through the doors together under fluorescent lights, and Danny laid everything out on the front desk himself. Badge numbers, addresses, dates, his own voice steady even though his hands were shaking. He didn't ask for protection. He didn't ask for anything. He only asked that they move fast, before Reyes could get to a reporter first. The sheriff's deputies picked up Reyes before sunrise. By the time the 6 o'clock news came on, there was no story about bikers and mystery shipments. There was only a report about a chop shop bust outside Callum, 3 arrests, and a county sheriff standing in front of cameras looking proud of himself. Nobody mentioned the Angels at all. Nobody mentioned the clinic. Everything stayed exactly where it belonged, quiet and safe and unseen. Marcus should have felt like celebrating. Instead, the moment the danger passed, his mind went straight to Della. She'd called him 2 nights before, her voice cracked down the middle like a dropped plate. Her father's heart had gotten worse. The doctor at the county hospital had used words like specialist and out of network, and we can't guarantee. And Della had done the math in her head the way she always did, dividing worry into shifts she couldn't work and bills she couldn't pay. She'd told Marcus she might have to take her father to the city, find someone who could actually help him, except the city doctors wanted deposits before they'd even look at his chart. She hadn't asked Marcus for anything. She never did. But he heard what she wasn't saying underneath what she was. So, the morning after Reyes got arrested, Marcus drove out to the clinic instead of going home to sleep. Amelia Hayes was in her office, going through a stack of paperwork with the kind of tired focus that came from running a clinic on hope and duct tape. She looked up when Marcus knocked on her open door, and her face softened the way it always did when she saw him, like she was looking at proof that good things still existed in the world. "Marcus," she said, standing, "I heard about the arrests. Thank God that's over." "It's over," he said. "I need a different kind of help now. Not for the clinic, for somebody who's helped me more than she knows." He told her about Della, about the diner, the napkin, the warning that started everything, about Ray Ruiz and his failing heart, and a daughter working double shifts trying to hold up a sky that kept getting heavier. Amelia listened without interrupting, the way she always did, and when Marcus finished, she was already reaching for her phone. "I know a cardiologist 2 hours from here," she said. "Dr. Okafor. She owes me a favor from years back, and she does pro bono work for patients who can't afford specialists. If Ray's case is what you're describing, she'll take it. She won't let money stand between a man and his heart if she can help it. None of us in this business ever really do. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he hadn't realized he was carrying. You can set that up? I can do more than that. Amelia was already dialing. I can make sure he's seen this week. It took 2 days to arrange everything. Marcus didn't tell Della what he was doing. He wanted to be sure first, wanted to walk into that diner with something solid instead of a maybe. When it was finally locked in, an appointment, a specialist, a plan that didn't involve draining every dollar Della had ever saved, he drove to the diner himself instead of calling. She was wiping down the counter when he walked in, the dinner rush already thinning out, and she looked up with the same tired smile she always gave him now, the one that had stopped being polite and started being real. "Hey, stranger," she said. "Haven't seen you in a couple days. Everything okay?" "Everything's more than okay." Marcus sat down at the counter, right at the booth where it all started, and folded his hands in front of him like he was about to say grace. "Your dad has an appointment with a cardiologist named Dr. Okafor this Thursday. She's the best in the state for what he's dealing with, and it's not going to cost you a dime you don't have." Della went still, the rag frozen in her hand. "What? How?" "Amelia set it up. Turns out taking care of people has a way of circling back around." Marcus's voice was steady, but his eyes were soft. "You gave a stranger a warning on a napkin once, not knowing what it had cost you if you were wrong. Seemed only right the kindness found its way back to you." For a moment, Della didn't move at all. Then her eyes filled, and she set the rag down like her hands had forgotten what to do with it. And she came around the counter without a word and wrapped her arms around Marcus's neck, holding on the way someone holds onto solid ground after being lost at sea. Marcus stood and held her back, feeling her shoulders shake, feeling relief pour out of her in a way that had nothing left to hide behind. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder, over and over, like the words were the only ones she had left. "Thank you. Thank you." The clubhouse smelled like it always did, old leather, motor oil, and the burnt edge of coffee that had been sitting on the warmer too long. Marcus stood at the front of the room where the pool table usually sat, except tonight the table had been pushed against the wall, and folding chairs had been dragged in from the back, arranged in a rough half-circle like church pews. Every member was there. He'd asked for that. No exceptions. Danny sat near the back, his face still carrying the fading yellow and purple of bruises that were healing slower than anyone liked. He kept his eyes down, hands folded between his knees, looking like a man waiting for a sentence to be read. Some of the brothers wouldn't look at him. Others looked at him too much, the kind of stare that made a man feel smaller than he already felt. Marcus let the room settle before he spoke. He'd learned a long time ago that silence did half the work words couldn't. 25 years I've ridden with most of you, he said. Some of you longer than that. And in all that time, there's a piece of what we do that we've kept in the dark. Not because it's shameful. Because we were scared of what people would think if they knew bikers in angels' colors were hauling medicine and hospital beds to a clinic that can't afford to keep its lights on. A few brothers shifted in their seats. Big Tom, arms crossed over his chest like always, raised an eyebrow but stayed quiet. We've told ourselves it had to stay secret, Marcus went on. Protect the club's reputation. Keep the wrong people from asking questions. And maybe that made sense once. But I'll tell you what I learned this past month. Secrets have a way of turning into weight. And weight breaks things it was never supposed to break. He looked at Danny then, just for a second, long enough that the room felt it. Almost lost a shipment. Almost lost trust between brothers. Almost lost a good man because he felt so invisible standing in the shadow of something he wasn't allowed to be proud of. He went looking for a different way to matter. Marcus's voice didn't rise, didn't shake. It just carried, steady as it always did. That's on all of us, not just him. Danny's head came up slowly, eyes red-rimmed, disbelief written plain across his face. I'm done hiding what we do at that clinic, Marcus said. I'm done treating kindness like it's something to be ashamed of. We've spent years pretending to be worse than we are so nobody looks too close. Maybe it's time we let them look. Big Tom finally spoke, gruff but not unkind. You're talking about going public, putting Angel's colors next to a clinic's name. I'm talking about telling the truth, Marcus said, that we're a club that takes care of people, all kinds of people, and that includes each other, even when one of us screws up so bad it nearly gets him killed. He let that settle too. Amelia Hayes runs that clinic on hope and second-hand equipment, Marcus continued. She's kept people alive out there that the system forgot. We've been part of that without ever getting to feel proud of it in the open. I say that changes tonight. Slowly, one by one, heads started nodding around the room. Someone in the back muttered, "About damn time," and a low ripple of agreement followed it. Danny stood up then, unsteady, like his legs weren't sure they'd hold him. The room went quiet again, waiting. I don't deserve to be part of this, he said, voice cracking. Not after what I did. But if you'll let me, I want to help lead it. The clinic runs, the supply routes, all of it. Out in the open, where it can't be twisted into something ugly again. He looked at Marcus, eyes wet but steady. I want to earn my way back. Not by being loud. By doing the work nobody sees, until you all trust me again. Marcus crossed the room and put a hand on Danny's shoulder, firm and warm. That's exactly the kind of man we need running it. Big Tom stood, then another brother, then another, until the whole room was on its feet. No vote needed. No debate. Just brothers looking at each other and deciding together that the thing they'd hidden was the thing worth being loudest about. Weeks later, the Rosalie Diner looked like a different place, though nothing about the building itself had changed. Same cracked vinyl booths, same bell over the door that never quite rang true, same smell of bacon grease and burnt coffee hanging in the air like an old friend. What had changed was the crowd. Where there used to be a handful of truckers and tired locals scattered through the place, now there were rows of motorcycles lined up outside every evening, chrome catching the sunset, leather vests filling the booths. Sal, who owned the diner, had taken to greeting Marcus with a grin and a handshake every time he walked through the door. Business had been slow enough 2 years back that Sal had thought about closing up for good. Now he was talking about adding a second grill and hiring another cook. He liked to say the angels had saved his diner without even trying, just by being the kind of men who tipped well and kept coming back. Marcus sat in the corner booth, the same one where Della had first slid a folded napkin under his coffee cup, his elbows resting on the table, a mug warm between his hands. Across from him sat Danny, looking healthier than he had in months, some color back in his face, the bruises long faded. Della slid into the seat beside Marcus, untying her apron and tossing it onto the bench, her shift finally over. You know, she said, stretching her arms above her head. Sal wants to expand the parking lot now. Says he needs room for all your bikes. Danny laughed, a real laugh, easy in a way it hadn't been in a long time. Tell him we'll take up permanent residence if he keeps that pie coming. He'd probably let you, Della said. You're better for business than the specials board. Marcus took a sip of his coffee, watching the two of them with a quiet warmth settling in his chest. It had been a long road to this booth, longer than any of them liked to think about some nights. But here they were. How's your dad doing? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. He'd been the one to make the call that connected Ray to Amelia's clinic, pulling favors built from years of quiet charity, calling in every bit of goodwill the club had earned through their secret work. Della's whole face softened. Better. So much better. Dr. Hayes says his heart's responding real well to the new treatment. He's even talking about coming down here himself, meeting the men who fixed his daughter's whole world. We didn't do much, Marcus said. You did everything, Della said, reaching over and squeezing his hand briefly before letting go. Don't you dare try to make yourself small about it. Danny leaned back in the booth, looking between them both. Feels strange, doesn't it? Sitting here now after everything that happened? Good strange, Marcus said. The best kind. For a moment, nobody said anything. The afternoon sun slanted through the diner's front windows, catching dust in the air, warming the counter where Sal stood polishing glasses and humming some old country tune under his breath. And there, hanging just behind the register in a simple wooden frame, was the napkin. The very one Della had slid under Marcus's saucer that rainy night, her handwriting still visible beneath the glass, a little smudged, a little shaky, but unmistakable. One of your brothers betrayed you. Be careful tonight. Sal had framed it himself, insisted on it after hearing the whole story secondhand from one of the younger angels who couldn't keep a secret to save his life. He said it belonged on the wall, said it was proof that sometimes the smallest things changed everything. Della caught Marcus looking at it and smiled. Still can't believe you kept that thing. Still can't believe you wrote it, Marcus said. Bravest thing anyone's ever done for me, and you didn't even know my name yet. I knew enough, Della said. Knew you looked like a man who needed a warning more than a stranger needed trouble. Danny raised his mug. To warnings that turn into friendships. Marcus lifted his own coffee, tapping it gently against Danny's mug, then Della's. To brothers who find their way back. And to waitresses who see more than anybody gives them credit for, Della added, grinning. They all laughed then, easy and full, the kind of laughter that comes only after real trouble has passed and left something better in its place. The framed napkin caught the afternoon light behind the counter, its edges worn soft with age, its message no longer a warning but a reminder of how far trust could carry people who chose to hold on to it. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.